Welcome to today's edition of Mainstream. I'm Harpreet Singh Toor. आप सबने मेरे वालों प्यार भरी सत श्री अकाल, नमस्कार, आदाब and shalom. As you know that this program is basically geared towards politics and political activities. Things happen, especially in the United States and around the world, around the globe, and how those things, whatever happens, affect not just the United States but also where those things happen. Starting from war in Ukraine, which is going on right now, to celebration of independence by Pakistan, and then following next day on the 15th by India, which is really very interesting that how this thing happened. But, like they say, history repeats itself. Why history repeats? Because we don't pay attention to history. And because we do not pay attention to history, the politicians, they play the chess game to create the atmosphere so that the people, they can fight against each other, kill each other, kill your neighbors, and then all of a sudden things change. I was reading a very small story about the partition. Before I share that story with you, and my guest is going to listen to that story also for the first time, and this is the real life story which was posted by a very close friend of mine who is a poet who has written a couple of books also, and also happens to be at one point the president of Punjab Sahitya Academy, and he was a professor at Punjab Agriculture University. He has a couple of things under his belt. But before we go there, and today I have a perfect person to talk about it. First I will give the name, and then we will talk about, because from the name, if we are from India and we understand India, then from the name we should be able to figure out where that person could be from. Okay? And she happens to be, I'm going to read the whole thing if I can read it, because I don't know much English. She is actually a leader in Indian traditional science, means Ayurveda. If I'm wrong, she will correct me. She is a Fulbright scholar, and she graduated from Princeton, Penn, and Columbia, and then also from Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And her name is Bhaswati Bhattacharya. Let's first say welcome to her. Bhaswati ji, thanks for coming in.
Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal. Namaskar. No, it's really an honor, even though, I'm going to put it out there. We were actually going to discuss Roe versus Wade, but because of this independence thing, which happened only yesterday, and from Pakistan day before yesterday, and what happened at that time, for me, it was like, no, this is something we cannot just let be pushed under the rug, because that's what is happening so far. Okay, so yes, she is, of course, she is from Bengal, and at the partition time, only two states were divided, Punjab and Bengal. Even though historically there were other divisions where the Punjab was divided, there were part of Punjab which were under Maharaja Ranjit Singh rule, there were parts of Punjab which were under British rules, there were parts of Punjab which were under independent Maharajas, same thing with the Bengal. And when they divided, what they did was, the partitioning was done in such a way that it will hurt the most to both the communities.
To the freedom fighter community.
Okay? And which were those two communities? The community which created the Indian National Army. Mohan Singh from Singapore, he created the army, and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, a Bengali gentleman, played the role of not only as a leader but also a foreign connection with the different governments, including at that time during the World War II with the government of Germany, so that the Britishers could be kicked out from India. So what happened is this is something which hurts, even though my personal family, we are still like from so-called East Punjab, now whatever is left of Punjab. And my in-laws family actually came from Gujranwala, from Pakistan side of Punjab. And Bhaswati's family, correct me, your parents did migrate, right?
That's right.
Okay.
They were from
So
Jashore.
let us hear from the horse's mouth first before we go to the next step. Let me hear, you know, this is interesting that we know each other for so many years, we never discussed this thing.
It's a trauma point. A lot of people who have gone through this trauma, once they come to America, there's no place for it. You know, there's a place for the Jewish Holocaust. There's a place for the Iron Curtain and the bloc countries of the former Soviet countries. There's a place for Vietnam. There's a place for the Congo, for everything that European and American people feel are worthy causes. But nobody talks about what happened in Punjab and what happened in Bengal. And my mom would tell us every August 15th, you know, we were usually in summer vacation, but she would say, I remember, and the story was the same every year. I remember when I was 10 years old, my father said, take a nap today because tomorrow is the 15th and we are going to be shadhin, we are going to be free. I want you to get up in the middle of the night.
That's a Bengali word for freedom, right?
It means, yeah, it means independent, shadhin.
Shadhin.
And you're going to get up at midnight and you're going to go to the rooftop and scream, Azad Hind, Azad Hind. And she said, but Papa, what's going to change? And he said, we are going to become free. So my mother recalls going to the rooftop with her two brothers and, you know, other friends that were in the adjacent rooftops.
Of the same age group.
With this, yeah, these kids, because the parents were too mature, the women were not allowed to yell and scream their happiness because one day before they were slaves of the British. They still had to, you know, they were a bit repressed from that slavery mentality, but also the repercussions. Whereas kids, you know, they can't be controlled.
Yeah, but it is funny, you know, I want you to continue on that part, but I also want to mention that within Indian psyche, that slave master thing is still there.
It is still there. It
right?
is still there, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And so my mother said it was acceptable socially for kids to, you know, scream and yell. So the parents got all the kids up on the roof and the kids were waving this new flag and screaming, Azad Hind, because it was allowed. No British could come and shoot them because they're children. But the parents had to stay kind of, restrained. So she said that the next morning, everyone walked around with white clothes and they were so proud in Bengal, even though Subhash Chandra Bose was, they kept thinking maybe he would come back, you know, nobody knew where he was, he had disappeared. And there were many people who had been killed. If you saw the footage of Blair Island, the Port Blair, now the Subhash Chandra Bose Island, and the dungeons and the prisons that were there and the things that they did, the torture machines that they had, that they've kept there as symbols, I forced myself to watch that and I think I was weeping through most of it because the stories of partition are in my own parents. My father was born in 26, so he was 21 years old.
Your eyes are getting wet.
I feel it, and I feel it for the Punjabis that fought, and there was no reason to carve out Lahore like that and give it to the Pakistan unless they had a reason that they would decimate the economies of the Punjabis by putting their, you know, the farmers in one place and the commerce and trade market in another place, the city, which is what they did. And in Bengal, the best cotton in the world is Indian cotton, Bangladeshi cotton. So if you take the people that make the cotton and you separate them from the people that weave it and the places where the trade happens.
Dhake the Malmal was known, and people in Punjab, especially the Sardars, they will, you know, feel proud to put on the turban of Dhake the Malmal.
They also like their Gopal Genji.
Oh yeah.
So Gopal, every Bengali has a Gopal Genji. Even I do. I kept my father's when he passed. And they are the softest, most durable cotton. I think those Gopal Genjis are from the 70s. They're still white. They're not ripped Meanwhile, you see the cottons from, you know,
Yeah,
later stage.
yeah,
So the Punjabi
And also-
turbans.
And also, it's really very interesting because my chacha, you know, my dad's younger brother, who was a soccer player, who is actually worshipped in Calcutta.
Ah,
Okay. I also went to Calcutta, and
Kaun
we
tha?
will put on Guru Kirpal Singh. He was known as Pali or Guru.
okay.
Okay. And I also went to Calcutta, and he actually, on his first trip to Calcutta, when he went and played with the East Bengal, he brought back totiyan for the men.
For the-
And we will put it on, and those toti in, you know, Bengali, Babu Moshai style, putting the, you know, tie it and then tuck it in the pocket of the shirt. That was, you know, and I remember that those things like
They broke up that cotton industry
yeah.
because it was in their best interest. And the fact that there were Indians that allowed them to do it is what still bothers me. When people say, oh, the British did it. You know, there were plenty of Indians helping the British.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to think about those people that chose to take the British side, including a lot of Bengalis who wanted, you know, their own benefit. So if they had trade that would benefit by staying in good with the British people that were leaving, they kept those connections.
Yeah,
My father, he went to Cambridge University in Britain, and he hated it there. My mom said there was a lot of racism. And when they were talking about nominating him for the Nobel Prize, they said, you know, you're a blackie, you're an Indian guy. Why would we take something like that and give it to one of you? And they were very insulting of him. And when the guys in the lab next to him got the Nobel Prize, you know, he went over and congratulated them, and he was very cordial. But their attitude was kind of one of these, you know, that mentality.
Yeah,
And that was very much there in the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Even you know, I don't know what's the system today in England, but in England, you know, anybody who migrated to UK, they were called subject even after becoming UK, you know, British citizens.
Yes.
They were not called Britishers, you know. And
And that split is still there, you know. In the Punjabis, it's there. The ones that are more Britified and like very proud of their British connection, and the ones that are very desi. And in America, we have a nice blend. We have the ones that really worked hard, and we have the ones that are kind of sitting on the laurels of the profits that they made by staying with the British. Same thing with Kolkata people.
yeah, yeah. Now we will continue on this thing, because I want the viewers to understand that partition, it did not happen 75 years ago and it is gone. No, it is there every day with the people and their next generation, and it will go on till, I don't know till what time, but yes, it hurts. Let's take a break, and after the break we will be right back. Welcome back to Main Street, and we are going to continue about this partition of India and the trauma. Before I go into next detail, and also I'm going to share that story with you in a few minutes after I'm done with this thing. If the people don't know, now they will know that Aksai Chin and Tibet used to be part of Punjab also with Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Jammu and Kashmir all the way up to including Balochistan and northwestern frontier province in
Kandahar.
Pakistan. That was all part of Punjab. That was the whole Punjab. And then division took place. Within that division, a lot of, you know, on the western side, Punjab state was left as a Punjab state, even though Balochistan and northwestern frontier province fell under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, but they carried their name and they still kept Punjab as intact, whereas on eastern side, the eastern Punjab, they divided it, okay, again for political reasons. Jammu and Kashmir was separated, and of course there was a war between India and Pakistan regarding Jammu and Kashmir, especially Kashmir, which is still going on, and which will not stop, even though it doesn't matter what you read. A lot of news is not coming out from either side of the border. I'm not blaming one side or the other, because news, when it comes out, it can be hurtful not only to the people but those political bosses. So their interest is to keep the news under the rugs. And Himachal Pradesh was created and Haryana was created out of that, and then all this to create the fights, you know, who has what rights and who doesn't have what rights. And I actually, my last visit in India, this is really interesting. A friend of mine who lives in Jalandhar, we went to Mere Pind Hushiyarpur, to my village, and I was talking to my chacha, who I was talking about, the soccer player, and my chachi, and I just asked her that how deep is the, you know, that water now, because they have the pump, and she told me that it is more than 400 feet now. It used to be at 30 feet. Okay? And this person, a friend of mine, last name Talwar, he looked at me and he didn't say anything at that time, but as soon as we left, we got in the car, the first thing he said to me was, he was like, I never knew about the water issue till I heard it today. And he was like, we in city, we always talk about what the hell they are talking about, what water level, what water table, you know. So it goes down to that. But I want to share this story.
So your point is that there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on
around these partition areas. It's
Yeah.
not even discussed,
No,
and most
of
people
course.
don't know about them.
Of course.
Right.
But I just want to share this story, which my friend actually, you know, shared.
The story that you've been telling us, you're going to tell us.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, you know, somebody was looking for a part of the car that was not available in the, because it's an old model, so it was not available out on the street. Somebody told him to go to Gill Road, Ludhiana, there is a shop. He said, if you go there, you will find it. So he went there, and he said when he went there, he looked at the person who was sitting there, he gave him, and he asked one of the employee to go and look for the part. And he saw the picture, and he read the date when that gentleman passed away. And it was only 20 days before the Independence Day. And he said, I just mentioned to him that, you know, had he lived another 20 days, he would have been 80 and would have looked at the Independence Day also. And the guy on the other side, he, for a moment, he was quiet, did not say anything. He was like, you know, as if he froze. And he said, I was like, he doesn't want to talk about it. And I was about to walk out so that I can wait for the part outside, that maybe he doesn't just want to share anything or doesn't want to talk. And he said, that's when he mentioned that my dad always said that I have this weight on my mind which will not go. And what was the weight? That when he was born, after him, they had a sister who actually was, you know, she was otherwise she was intellectually everything, but her hands and feet, they were not working.
So they left her?
So he will carry her around everywhere. They will play together, they will do everything, and he literally, they were, within the family, they will talk about being inseparable. Okay? And as the time passed, he was about 15, she was about 12, and then this partition thing started happening. On 14th of August, he said somebody from one of the area, some Muslim person came in, and he said that this village has 15 families of the Sikhs and nobody should survive. Okay? And he said, you know, the Sikh family, which means my grandparents, they got together in the Gurdwara and they started planning about what to do and how to deal with it. And they figured out that we will not let them have our women. So they decided to ask the women to jump in the well and die, commit suicide, and the men will leave. So they took the decision. He comes home, and when he comes home, he tells his wife that this is what we have decided. So mentally the females prepared themselves to overnight jump. Okay? And that's when this girl's thing came in, and they were like, what should we do about him? And his dad told him that you have no option but to kill her. And he literally killed her sister
to prevent her from being raped or maliciously killed.
Yeah. You know, so that is something, you know, and I'm pretty sure on Bengal side the same things happen.
A lot of bad things
happen. Lot of people don't talk about it.
And they can't.
They can't. I understand that.
And we have to be compassionate to our grandparents or parents or whatever relation, that there are things that they don't want to talk about. Just like all humans who've come from trauma incidents like this.
Yeah.
It's a very tough
thing. It is so tough to talk. But at the same time, there is something, you know, which our generation can do, okay? Which is whatever we can collect it, read the history, read the books. That's where we started from.
But if the books are going to traumatize our kids, the argument that people say is, I went to America, I want my kids to grow up without having the fear, the anger, the insecurities that the trauma creates. And as a physician, I don't wish people to have trauma, right?
No, I understand
so
that.
If I'm going to give them that history and say, you have to remember Bhagat Singh and this is how he was killed. You have to remember how these people went to these, you know, dungeons or these prisoners and how they were tortured. Yes, it is part of history. That's on one side.
But that's how the freedom was won.
Well, the freedom was, you know, there's a lot of history that we
history
can't talk
that,
about.
you know,
but
yes.
the freedom was not won when Gandhi and Nehru signed an agreement with Mountbatten. It was won really a few months earlier when the Indians that were part of the British Indian Army said, we will not put our rifles against our Indian brothers. And the British general said, you have to. And they said, look, it's at the end of World War II. You guys are basically down and out because of the German and British front that there was, World War II. And we are not going to help you. And there was a group of British that came for their next shipment because, you know, they were raping all of the supplies out of India. They were coming toward Bombay and they were shot down by Netaji's force and the Navy that was the group that did not want to be loyal to the British Indian Army. And when they killed them, the British realized, oh my God, if the Indians all come together and they kill us, we don't have a chance because we're 1 in 20 in number. And we've somehow convinced them that they should pack the, you know, loot for us and put it on our ship while we sail away. They're so stupid. Well, now they're starting to smarten up. And so those kind of incidents, there were about 6 or 7 incidents that happened in 1946 and 47 that actually created this atmosphere where the British left. It's not that people were so good at being non-violent and it was Gandhiji's non-violent movement that did it. There are plenty of countries, there are plenty of countries that got independence from the British without having to do, you know, a non-violence movement or not having to have partition. Why did India have to have partition? I didn't see any of the other Commonwealth countries having to do partition in order to get their freedom. It was done to handicap India by taking its 2 arms away. This arm on the west side being Punjab, this side being Bengal. And the British were clever about it, and we as Indians sat back.
For me, it is slightly, I will add to my side of this story, that Britishers knew that they are going to get kicked out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they were looking for somebody who will let them go with some
Quietly.
respect and
That's
quietly. Right. And that's where Gandhi and Nehru came in. And of course, Muhammad Ali Jinnah also played in there. Okay. And there were some other leaders also, but these are the top
And
leaders,
there was the affair between Mountbatten's wife and Nehru, which is quite well documented.
Yeah,
and everyone wanted to
but
let this beautiful love story continue. And so we had to have good relations between, right?
So, yeah, but it is something, you know, which we have to, the reason why I say they need to read, I'm not saying that they should let their kids to read when they are young, but when they grow up, when they are done with the college,
They should read.
They
should read, yes.
So we're going to take a break here, and after the break, we will be right back. Welcome back to Main Street, and we're going to talk about that, and this is for next about 10 minutes, because then we do have a person who is running for the US Congress from upstate. And the beauty of American democracy, even though it has its own flaws, but still with all the flaws, there are things which we can achieve here, which the people in other places in the world, they just dream about. So continuing on the partitioning and everything, India and Pakistan, they literally fought 4 wars, if I may say, because the original was in 1947 when Jammu and Kashmir was part of that, was taken away, or you know, they called irregulars, even though it was the army at that time. Then it was 1965, then 1971, and then 1999, you know, Kargil. Okay, so that was the open war, but underground war is still going on. Okay, but the thing is, we're not going to talk about the war today, because I know in one of my previous shows when I was doing American Vision, I did talk about 1965 war, that how at that time Indian government was ready to move all the way armed forces up to Ambala and give up all the Punjab, and how it was kept, the way it was kept. But that is for another day. The war took place in September. September is coming, then we'll talk about it. This is the news for you, right? You never knew about it.
No, I did.
You did? Good. Great. Actually, not just good, great. So let us continue on that. Now the question comes in, if we want something like, you know, we're talking about, you know, Armenian genocide, Jewish genocide, the other genocide, if we want something for Bengalis and Punjabis also, okay, we need to teach the kids when they are grown up enough so that they can understand why you and I are asking something, right?
Why we didn't ask for it for 75 years, actually. There's been a few people that have said partition happened and we should have gotten some kind of retribution, reparation, something to repair our damages that were done. And nobody talked about it.
Nobody will listen to that. You know,
Right.
Not to cut you off, but I'm really honored that you are talking it openly the way I wanted somebody to talk about it.
But the problem is that nobody does talk about it. And I'll just tell
Well, at least
one
we
of
are
my
talking,
friends
right?
this past
And
weekend.
there are people who are listening.
Well, one of my friends this past weekend was at a party and just mentioned something about this because Monday was Independence Day. And the host called her over and said, you know, I don't want you to talk about these such, they didn't say liberal, they said something about how it's very like leftist talk. And she said, this is not leftist, these are facts. Well, this isn't real history. I said, you know, what's in our school books is not real history. So when we share facts that are known facts, they're in the minds and the hearts of the people that are living, and they're also in many, 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 many books, historical, political as well as cultural books. Why is it that I can't talk about it? No, I, as the host here, I don't want you to talk about it. And she came out feeling very, very offended by this, that you have a group of people who don't want these kind of facts to be discussed because, chalte hai, right? They are very uncomfortable. They are not emotionally grown to where they can actually discuss it. And they're afraid that someone's going to start becoming violent if they discuss it. They don't know how to have a discussion without shouting and yelling. And I mean, I've seen it in India, I've seen it in America. They can't just talk and listen and discuss without getting overheated.
I will say something on that part, that I myself sometimes, during the discussion, I become passionate about certain things. And when you become passionate, your voice goes up.
You or you?
Me.
Okay.
Okay, Harpreet. And it doesn't mean that I'm violent. It's the passion and it is the pain which is inside.
That's right.
Which I want to come out.
Yes.
So that somebody can really, hear it, see it, feel it.
So as an Ayurveda person,
then come to the, some sensible thing that, how to heal and move on.
Ayurveda has been there for 5,000 years and watched many, many, many wars.
Oh, yeah.
And it gives guidelines on how to get your pain out, but to actually do it in a way that is not harmful. And yes, you should get your pain out. But if you think about being a fly on the wall and watching yourself and thinking, how do I want to present myself? I don't think most people want to present themselves as an out of control, shouting, yelling, crazy person. What they need to see in themselves is that I respect you as I talked with you, but I also respect me as I talk with you.
Yeah.
And if people can keep that in their mind as they talk, you can be passionate, but you don't need to shout and yell and curse and intimidate other people so they can't even hear what you're saying. The problem is we can't have a discussion until both sides have their ears open, right?
It's like, talking at each other instead of talking to each other.
With each other, that's right.
Yeah.
And so teaching that, there's been a lot of work on how to communicate. It's been done by the rishis, it's been done by the wise men of various traditions. I mean, I live in Benares when I'm in India. There are people of so many different spiritual traditions that know how to have dialogues and multilogues with each other, as well as in the West.
Oh, yeah.
There's an entire group of people that do something called nonviolent communications, where they teach the most violent people how to get out their pain. Prisoners who have been tortured, women who have been maligned or raped or had, killings in front of them. One of the articles you have talks about how this man was forced to watch his mother get killed in front of him and how that has sat with him. That pain is real.
Oh, yeah.
And he needs to get it out. Nobody's saying he should keep it trapped inside. But for him to take it out and harm other people. One of my Punjabi friends, his dad was a very violent person and used to beat his mother. And he used to watch this program actually regularly, but he had that side in him that was very angry. And my friend would kind of excuse it because dad had gone through a lot of, bad things. But it damaged my friend because he had to witness that violence between his parents. And the mother always made excuses for the father, saying, okay, he went through.
That is, again, like I said, there are so many things which we need to discuss. That is domestic violence. There is so much prevalent domestic violence.
But partition-based domestic violence.
Exactly.
Right? The trauma-informed.
The trauma of partition is an excuse for me that, okay, he is upset because of.
He wants to get his pain out.
This
And the way he's going to do it is beating his wife, his mother, his children, his friends, right? That discussion has not happened in a meaningful way. There are mental health professionals in India. There are many mental health professionals in Punjab and in Bengal and everywhere.
Over here too.
And they are trying, but people as a community do not socially curb that violence. They allow it to happen, saying,
because they want to
Uncle, wo to thoda aise hi hai.
They want to keep it under the rug.
Yes, and as you're saying, we need to discuss it. We need to discuss it with our children so they can understand this constellation of family violence that keeps, as you said, repeating generation after generation. Kids don't even know why they're violent. They just know their dad did it, their uncle did it, their grandfather did it.
So
well, grandfather hit grandma, so dad hit mom, so I'm going to hit my sister, and then later I'll hit my wife. And this continues on. And when I think about what it is, it's that pain inside, but it's also the insecurity. My father
It's
always,
the combination, yeah.
my father always knew that there were white men who could denigrate him just by referring to the color of his skin. And I remember witnessing it once when we were in America by a white guy that was very rude to my dad. And I stood up for my dad, and he pushed me aside, and I was offended, and I realized he was trying to protect me because he was used to the violence, and he popped back into that guy that was 20 years old or 18 years old at the time of the British, when they would come in to your house and take whatever they wanted, whether it was your gold or your old ornaments or your old books. So many Ayurvedic physicians lost their priceless wisdom and knowledge because the British just came and stole it. And I have lots of detailed stories about these things.
Yeah,
but today,
but,
let's talk about what we do for our audience who are living with the repercussions and echoes of something 75 years ago. I'm proud that we're free 75 years later, but there's a part of me that says we are proud. Most of us Bengalis and Punjabis yesterday were crying. Did you cry at some point? I listened to Jana
I did
Gana
not
Mana.
cry, to be honest with
I
you.
was weeping.
But literally, because again, that pain inside is there. And that's why the whole show we were going to do something different.
And we agreed to change it. There's one thing I do want to say as an education, and I do think it's important that all of us, after leaving this program, we go and read something about history that we didn't know and go and teach it to our young students or kids or nephews or some, nieces, grandchildren. I was talking with someone about where she was from, and she said, well, I'm from Bihar. I said, oh, so basically you're Bengali. She says, no, I'm Bihari. I said, 100 years ago, actually say 125 years ago.
Yeah.
Right, 125 years ago, Bengal went from Benares to Burma, and from the Himalayas down to basically just above Madras, right? That entire area was Bengal. You ask people today, and they don't even know that it was Bengal. But you talk to older people, and they will say, yeah, of course, Bengals would retire to the western shore, the sunset. Where did the sunset? In Benares, and that's why people go to Benares at the end of their life, especially Bengalis. People don't even know the history of Bengal and how many times it was partitioned by these various Europeans, many Europeans, not just the British who were there, the Dutch, the French. The French left after the British. How many people know that?
Yeah,
the Portuguese were there.
We have to take a break here. We
so
need
get
to do
educated is what I want.
Get educated.
I just want to offer
and
that.
Yeah, let us take
educated.
a break. And after the break, we are going to talk to this person who is running into the primary for the US Congress from upstate. And it's really interesting that the election right now, the early voting is going on in New York City. And I don't know how many among you have gone and
go vote.
Go vote.
Go
Let's
vote.
take a break. Welcome back to Mainstream, and right now we have with us a congressional candidate from Congressional District 19, upstate New York. Her name is Jamie Chaney, and she has reached out to South Asian community, which actually we should be honored that we are getting recognized that we do exist in New York. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for reaching out. And before we go, give the viewers about a little bio about yourself. What you have done and what you are planning to do.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Harpreet, thank you so much for having me this evening. It's really an honor to be here and to have this conversation. I am running for Congress in the newly drawn 19th Congressional District, which starts in Columbia County over by the Massachusetts border and runs all the way west out to Ithaca. And the key population centers in this district are Hudson, Saugerties, Woodstock, Binghamton, and Ithaca, and it's deeply, deeply rural in between those. I spent my professional career building a company that identifies what benefits programs most support working parents in the workforce. We work on programs like backup and subsidized childcare, health care for all employees, and also flexible schedules. And then my husband and I also run a farm up here in the Hudson Valley with our 3 boys who are 12, 10, and 8.
Okay, you know, I was looking at it, and you also mentioned about, you know, being about reproductive rights and, you know, other rights for the workers. When it comes down to reproductive rights, I know you are in that part of New York where it's kind of like reddish instead of bluish. So what is the reaction to Roe versus Wade over there?
You know, Harpreet, what's so interesting to me is, particularly across the center of our district, which one might label deep red at a glance, when we spend time knocking on doors or talking to people, and we truly try to do this across parties, even in our Democratic primary, we continue to knock Republican doors because we feel strongly that if you stick to only one party, you lose the dialogue of the whole community. And we have yet to knock a door in New York or have a phone conversation of someone who is actively anti-women's choice or anti-reproductive rights. I truly believe that this Supreme Court decision is out of sync with the views of the American public, and the work that we're doing on the ground in this very, very purple district absolutely supports that.
Now, my question comes in, you know, when, excuse my ignorance about few things here, because I'm from India originally, that's where I was born. For me, the question comes in a way, the whole thing, Roe versus Wade, was settled in 1972. Why, since then, there was a consistent effort to chip it away? And the whole thing which baffles me, maybe you can answer and make me understand, that it is the men who are trying to take away the right of the women. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Harpreet, and no, I don't think you are wrong. And I'm someone who very much grew up in a world where I believe that Roe versus Wade and a woman's access to this type of reproductive health care in the U.S. was very much settled law. It has become a rallying cry for the Republican Party, although I think that it was more important a decade or two ago when it pulled voters into the party, particularly conservative Christian voters. As we've seen, it is still out of sync with today's party, but that legacy of elections over decades has meant that there are judges in place that obviously led to today's Supreme Court decision. I am struck every day that women are over 50% of the population in this country, yet we are, depending on your calculation, I think we're about 28% of Congress. And
You know,
this is very much a story of men making decisions about women's rights, and I think there are many solutions, but one is that we need more female voices in our political leadership.
I agree. You know, it's very interesting that today's my show was going to be to get you on the show, but also we were going to talk about Roe versus Wade, but we ended up discussing the freedom of India and the partition which left the things. So my guest today, she is she's a professor, she is a scholar, Fulbright scholar who went to,
Harvard
Princeton,
as well.
Penn,
I went to
Columbia,
Harvard
and
as she did, yes.
And Harvard. And I'm going to let her ask you if she may have one question before I let you, explain the things which you plan to achieve if you go through the primary and you get elected. Bhaswati, you want to ask something?
I would love to see how you would help the American public learn more about the importance of farming as a basic American value and the real need for Americans to understand more about where food comes from, the importance of farms and natural farms to produce food, and what you see as ways to get this very quiet part of New York to become more of the conversation around food and food rights for people.
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for joining the conversation as well. It's wonderful to meet you, or at least meet you over a phone line. And that's a great question, and one that I'm so happy to be tackling in this moment in time. I think that the reality of today in the United States is that very rarely do we think about where our food comes from. As I mentioned, I run a farm with my husband, and in April 2020, many of the large processors out in the western side of the U.S. closed down when there were COVID outbreaks on their processing floors. And all of a sudden, we, as a small family farm in upstate New York, our phones started ringing off the hook as people felt, for the first time probably in their lives as Americans, a deep sense of food insecurity, regardless of their access to funds and resources. This idea that they literally may not be able to get the product they needed to feed their family, and
to have that meal on the table at the end of the day.
Exactly. And this idea that realizing that regional supply chains and local food supply are critical. I think that moment in time actually really benefited farmers in New York State. And I can speak to our relationship with the family farmer. We have many new customers we got in that moment in time. But there's something else that happened in New York State around the same time, which is that we put in place an active program called Nourish New York, which works with farmers to purchase excess food and uses various channels to bring it to those who are experiencing food insecurity.
Okay. Jamie, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. You have about 30 seconds to pitch in. What do you need to say so that the viewers, they can hear? And I will try to get you back before next Tuesday also, if we can, because the voting closes next Tuesday at 9 p.m., right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so go ahead.
In closing, I'll say this. I'm really excited to work on issues of housing and food insecurity in this new district. Your viewers can find us at jamiecheney.com. We are actively phone banking, knocking on doors, and most importantly, voting. So come learn about our campaign at jamiecheney.com, and then make sure that you get yourself to the polls for early voting or on election day next Tuesday. And Harpreet, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jamie.
Connect with your viewers.
Yep, thank you very much. And with that note, our show comes to a close. Till next time, good night and good luck.